although you probably do not recognize these faces, these women played an essential role in the creation of the workforce we have today in America. Now you're probably wondering how they did this. Well, it wasn't something they did necessarily, but instead something that was done to them. On March 25th, 1911, these women, along with several other men and women, died, tragically in a devastating factory fire, all due to the poor health and safety conditions they were working under. The recent COVID pandemic has showed us that tragedy can bring a community together as we work for a change. And that's exactly what the death of these laborers did. Although the Triangle Shirtwaist factory was a devastating point in history, it was also a turning point as the need for each individual worker became a priority. As a woman seeking to be an entrepreneur, I feel it is necessary that I understand how these opportunities are available to me if I take the steps to achieve them. As stated by Michelle Obama, no country can ever really flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contributions of half of its citizens. Today, throughout my presentation, I will first explain what the Triangle Factory was and what happened prior to this historical event. Secondly, I will explain the fire itself. And lastly, I will explain the changes sparked by this devastation. So to begin, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was located in Manhattan, New York, and it was the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Ash Building, also known as the Brown Building. As it refers to the workers were primarily immigrant women, all seeking to better their lives and the lives of their families. And as it refers to what they did, they all sewed and made the once popular blouse worn by women during this time, known as the shirtwaist. The working conditions, however, did not resemble a civil place. As stated by Ms. Hodges, director of the Gender Bureau of the International Labor Organization, they had no rights, no legislative protection, no representation. It was a classic sweatshop, one stop away from slavery. The Global Nonviolent Database paints the gruesome picture that was the hell these workers entered into almost every day. Working 14-hour days, making $2 or less, depending on the mistakes they made. The allowance of little to no breaks, unsanitary conditions, little ventilation due to being locked into a room by lock and key, and fragments of material littering the floor, these workers had had enough. So in 1909, they went on strike. And although this strike did provide them with some benefits, such as an increase in pay and decrease in hours worked, what would happen in a few short years proves this was not enough. On March 25th, 1911, as stated in an article by Ella Wagner from the Cultural Resources Office of Interpretation at New York University, the deadliest industrial disaster in New York City history would take place. As women were going about their day, sewing fabric, making shirtwaists, a fire had begun and no one warned them. With no safety precaution available, along with the locked door, they were doomed. And although some were able to escape, in less than 30 minutes, 146 men and women died that day, and they had to make the unthinkable decision to burn alive or jump to their death.
Street, scores of burning dead bodies.
There was also an iron fence below, so some of the young women, when they jumped, were impaled on the iron fence. And people who saw it said that they never forgot it, that it was a sight that burned itself on the retina of the watchers.
William Shepard, a reporter for the United Press, called the story in as he watched from
sound than description can picture. It was the thud of a speeding, living body on a stone sidewalk. Thud. Dead. Thud. Dead. Thud. Dead.
As stated earlier, what follows tragedy is the motivation to come together and make a change. Social justice and improved working conditions followed this event, as almost 40 new laws were passed that included fire safety, limitations on hours, and safer conditions for workers. It also established the commemoration of International Women's Day and the International Labor Organization. Lastly, in an article that focuses on the history of industrial safety, historian Arthur F. McVoy describes the Triangle Fire as a catalyst to progressive era factory reform. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was filled with immigrant women all seeking to better their lives. Now it is a representation of how terribly wrong things can go if each individual worker is not made a priority. They went on strike in order to improve these conditions, but were silenced. Unfortunately, it took their death for their screams to be heard. And lastly, the event of the fire led to safer working conditions, new opportunities for women, and a leap toward progressive era factory reform. The faces of these women represent more than the injustice they saw, but strength and growth. And although they died tragically, the fatality of these women sparked the change they so desperately sought.